This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. The death of a man who sang and played the guitar overshadows the news from Poland, Iran, and Washington tonight. Former Beatle John Lennon, who was 40, was shot and killed last night outside his luxury apartment in New York. The alleged killer is an unemployed security guard and printer who had lived in Hawaii. News of Lennon's death touched off a wave of shock and mourning around the world. Steve Young reports.
You know, we have a picture here that is so famous of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and you took this just hours before his death. What happened here at this shoot?
Well, this was actually done for the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, and I wanted to photograph them, both of them nude, embracing, and this is not unusual for John and Yoko. They've been photographed they had press conferences from their beds,
right,
I remember. For their career. And at the last minute, Yoko decided that she didn't want to, that she would take her shirt off and not her pants. So I said, well, go ahead, leave your clothes on. And of course, I was disappointed, but it turned out to be, a much stronger image. The idea of the embrace, at that time, the fact that they were still in love, and they loved each other deeply was important to me, and I wanted to try to tell a story about that.
Why didn't you release this to the media right after he died? You waited, didn't you?
Well, I obviously, was just stunned by the fact that he was killed that evening, and I felt very strongly that it would be as if I was exploiting his death. I really didn't want to sell the picture. I think now I would have done differently if it had happened now, because in a certain way it was a strong photograph, and it would have been nice if it was seen around the world. You have to think about other things besides the money. It was a strong photograph. It would have been nice as a last photograph of John. People now know it's the last photograph of John, but right. At the time,
it was such a horrible, shocking time for all of us to go through the death.
It was the end of it was definitely the end of an era. When we shot the first Polaroid and I peeled it, and he looked at it, he was very, very excited. He said, this is our relationship.
Once John died, no question that we were going to use it, and then went further and decided it just didn't need any headlines at all. So it was the one issue of Rolling Stone ever that we put out that had no type on the cover, except the logo.
John, he didn't know the idea till I got there in the morning. And he got right into it. He said, no problem, and that was John. He was willing to go to extremes, to express his point. And so he was killed that night. He saw the Polaroids. He loved the Polaroids. He thought it really expressed his relationship with Yoko. And I promised, he was really afraid that the Rolling Stone wasn't going to run it on the cover, because he felt that Rolling Stone really just wanted to run him on the cover. He wasn't going to run Yoko, and I promised him it would be on the cover. So when he was killed that night, I pulled myself together the next morning and went into Rolling Stone, and they were already mocking up a cover for just his face, on the cover. And I said, no way, this is John Lennon, this is the way it's going to be. So we ran the shot of him naked. I thought it was also very brave of Rolling Stone to do that,
After nearly 13 years at Rolling Stone, Leibovitz became synonymous with the magazine. Her identity became indistinguishable from that of Rolling Stone. A new opportunity arose when Vanity Fair asked her to come work for their magazine in addition to Rolling Stone, thanks to the help of Bea Feitler. By this time, Annie's drug use was getting out of hand, and her increasingly reckless behavior was impacting her work. She was leaving rental cars around the country, missing deadlines for photo assignments, and the culture of Rolling Stone wasn't helping her. It came as a surprise to Leibovitz, but Jan Wenner rejected the idea of her working for both magazines, knowing that Annie needed to get clean and that doing so would be impossible if she remained in the world of Rolling Stone.
Those times were a little crazy. It was the peak of the drug times, and pretty much everybody we were covering and everybody we were working with was taking drugs, in one form or another. And, it just got kind of crazier and crazier, and Annie got into it perhaps a little heavier than most. And after a while, it sort of just kind of took over, and I started managing her and her managing the drugs. And it led to some pretty rough times.
There is this myth that you have to be in a lot of pain, you know, to be working, and I think I certainly fell into that category of thinking that it did make it, in a certain way, you know, easier to work because you really didn't have to have a life, you know. It took care of any other needs, you know, that you had.
You know, finally came to a place it was just best for us to kind of part ways at the end and get her out of a milieu that might have encouraged her to take drugs, and also get our operations back on a more even keel, and, you know, and get off that roller coaster that Annie had become.
You know, I got professional help, and it was done. And I just took a deep, deep, deep breath and moved on.
Leibovitz came out of rehab and transitioned from the world of rock and roll and into a new sphere of celebrity. The readers that grew up with Rolling Stone now had money and power, and Vanity Fair was the magazine on the rise for them.
I was so lucky to work with Annie Leibovitz, and when I first arrived at Vanity Fair, you know, when it was all such a big mess, a classic glass cliff situation I came into, I had to go in over the weekend and redesign the magazine, and spent 4 days with the art department just hurling things out, in and out, and like making the new design that we had to do fast before the next issue. And I started to ransack the art department for photographs. I knew there were drawers full of treasures. I just sensed that there must be these photographs that this very profligate magazine had just been assigning, that there's bound to be some great stuff. And lo, what did I find when I opened the drawer in the art department was an unpublished, fantastic portfolio that Annie Leibovitz had done of comedians in every shape and form. I mean, there was Whoopi Goldberg in the famous bath of milk, which became an iconic picture, and there was Pee Wee Herman hanging upside down from a lamp, and there was all of these hilarious pictures of these comedians in different situations. And so I put them all into the magazine, gave it 10 pages, and I called it, it was the April issue, so we called it April Fools. And it was absolutely glorious. And that was the sort of beginning of my collaboration with Annie, who was thrilled to have been sort of brought out of obscurity she was very famous at Rolling Stone, then hired by Vanity Fair and had kind of not been used. So this was the beginning of our great collaboration. And we did so many great portfolios, covers, you know. She became the iconic visual definer, really, of Vanity Fair's whole look and feel.
This was for a series for Vanity Fair magazine on young upcoming comedians. All I had for research was a very badly done video of her nightclub routine. In that, she plays a little girl who is trying to use Clorox thinking that if she washes her skin, that underneath it will be white. And it was a very poignant part of her show.
And then she said, even if you sit in the vat of Clorox till hell freeze over, you ain't gonna be nothing but black. And she was right, because I sat in the Clorox and I got burned. And she said, I just have to be happy with what I got. But look, see, it don't do nothing. It don't blow in the wind. And it don't cascade down my back. It don't, and I put that bouncing and behaving stuff in it, and it didn't even listen. And I want some other kind of hair to do something else. I do.
You know, I met her at her house in Berkeley, at her apartment, and we went to, her friend had a better bathtub, and I was thinking that she should just be in the bathtub scrubbing, as if she's scrubbing off her black skin. A friend of mine who was an advertising photographer said that milk photographs really nicely white. So we had gallons and gallons of milk in pots on the stove, and we heated them up because I couldn't put her into cold milk. And we poured the milk in, and then she got into the milk bath, and she kind of slipped down into it like that. And I went, oh my goodness, this is graphically amazing.
We used to have great brainstorm sessions together where we would just kick it around. And I would think, wow, light bulb.
Even my work is criticized sometimes for being too on the surface. And I sometimes find the surface interesting. To say that the mark of a good portrait is whether you
you get them or you get the soul or whatever. I just don't think this is possible all the time or some of the time. And could I get the soul? I guess I probably could. If, you gave me a year or so with each person, I would get the soul, I promise you. I just don't think it's necessary, except for with the people who love you and you love them, and maybe you want to go that step further.